Welcome, everyone, to my March 12th, 2024 webinar. This one is called Legacy, What We Leave to Future Generations. I'm going to tell you how I got acquainted with the term legacy. Uh, when I was a child, my grandmother, my father's mother, was a house mother at a fraternity house. And long before she was the house mother, my father and my uncle, and I think another relative, were residents of the fraternity house. And there was the tradition that anyone who was related to someone who had been a member of the fraternity house uh, was pretty much assured acceptance as a member if you enrolled in the University of Iowa, is where it was. And so I was regarded as a legacy. And I thought that was kind of interesting. It was like for a little kid, I had a title, so to speak. I was a legacy. And that would mean that if I chose to go to the University of Iowa and was accepted, and if I were to apply to be, actually, you apply as a pledge, it's called. If I were to pledge the fraternity, then I was pretty much assured acceptance, unless I was a really creepy person. And I didn't think I was that creepy. So I thought I would get in. Um, Later, I came to understand that there was another kind of use of the term legacy, not just somebody who was, a shoe-in by virtue of relationship, but in terms of what a person would leave uh, to their future generations, what legacy you would give them. That was, frankly, that was primarily a financial kind of situation. What kind of bequests you would make, and what the kind of inheritance you would plan, for your children and grandchildren. And that might involve setting up financial stuff like trusts and other financial instruments that would leave that. Foundations is the word I was thinking for. So foundations and trusts that would manage finances that you contributed to them, usually, and thus avoiding tax consequences, at least at that time. There wouldn't be an inheritance tax on what you would bequest. And then those trusts or foundations would use your money the way you intended it to be used. It was mainly a financial thing, but also it had enormous practical financial management considerations that were a good thing. And of course, we might, make bequests to religious organizations, social institutions, political institutions, and to charities. So we could make good use of our money. So much of the legacy was how we left our finances and, maybe some things that we owned, how we would pass those out to create a memory, so to speak, in people's minds that you were this sort of a person. You had done these things for your family, for your institute, organizations that you may have belonged to or wished to support, political organizations, stuff, and to donate to various charities. And so this was a big expanded view of what legacy meant. And so I came to understand that and, actually honor that quite a bit. I thought that was, a really important thing to do, was to plan out how your estate, as we call it, the material assets that you had would be passed along to future generations. And oftentimes these uh, institutions, finances, financial things that we set up, trusts and foundations, would establish another kind of legacy, which was a reputation and a place in history. Now, most of us, face it, we're going to be forgotten after the people that knew us pass away, right? And like if I have eventually get great grandchildren, they're probably really not going to know me. I knew one of my grandfathers, but only very briefly. I think he passed when I was 3 or maybe 5 years of age. And I honestly don't remember the man at all. I have no memory of what he was like. I do know that he smoked cigars, and one of the things that I enjoyed doing as a toddler was finding the what's called a cigar wrapper. It's a little band that's around a cigar, and the people who's going to smoke a cigar would slip the band off and discard it, and I would try to find those and put them on my fingers as rings. And that's about the only memory I have of my maternal grandfather. And I did not know my paternal grandfather. He passed away before I was born. Um, so these practical matters are important, and having a legacy it can be important. I know many people. We hear about it. They talk about the legacy a president or a CEO or founder of a company leaves, to the future. In terms of the organization that they have created or the administration that they had, like a president. What kind of a presidency was it? What's his legacy for the future? And these are very important considerations for one personally, but you can't take that with you. So a legacy is always what you leave to future generations, what how you're going to be remembered, and what influence you will have on into the future. And many people created trusts and foundations; those have been perpetuated for a long time into the future. And some of them, basically have no endpoint unless they either run out of money or the kind of institution that they were created to support or services they were created to support, they're no longer needed. And this often then the trust or foundation may be dissolved. But frankly, I'm not sure that that's what really matters. And I had a little poem, um, and I think this is the yes. And so I am going to share a screen. Can I make that full screen? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Sorry about the delay there. I was a little less organized than I thought I was. Um, so if I click on share screen, and we will preview that guy. It looks like that is showing full screen. So I hope it is. So I'll just read it to you in case it's hard for you to see it. But this is a poem by Linda Ellis called The Dash. I read of a man who stood to speak at a funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke of the following date with tears, but said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time they spent alive on earth, and now only those who love them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we lived and loved and how we spent our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be is left that can still be rearranged. Pardon me. To be less quick to anger and show appreciation more and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, Remember that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you lived your dash? So, in truth, that's really what matters. It matters how we live our dash, how we live the time between our birth and death, and what we leave. So, what are the kinds of things that we leave in our dash? And we're not talking the material things now. First of all, there's the influence that we have had on others that they will carry into the future. Good things, maybe not so good things. What kind of a parent have you been? What kind of a grandparent or even great grandparent? What kind of a friend have you been? What kind of a partner, business partner, whatever? What kind of a community leader have you been, or example that you've set in your community? Have you participated in, say, a church and the activities of the church and the ministries of the church, the things that it does for the community, or perhaps some other organization? For some reason, the Salvation Army comes to my mind, and other organizations, service organizations. Um, and of course, what kind of influence will you have had at your place of work, whatever that might have been? Um, and so it's not just how people think of you, but what actually did you do that has had an effect on the world, on people, certainly, but on the way things flow from you to future generations. Um, Oftentimes, the influence that we've had is a perpetuation of the patterns of thinking and behavior that have existed in our family, often for many generations. We just call them familial patterns, pardon me, not familiar, familial patterns. And the familial patterns often hold a great deal of energy, personal energy. We sometimes say psychic, but it's actually that and an underlying energy of the universe, and how that's affecting us and affects other people. And so, oftentimes we perpetuate, particularly, you might say, challenging things that have come to people's lives. Um, they could be organic things like diseases, inherited diseases and stuff like that. But we don't really have control over those. But what we do have control over is how we live the dash, how we live that space of time that we are here on earth. And were we a good friend? Were we a dedicated parent? Did we serve our community? And so on. These are the important things. And so, when we look at how we're living our life and what might yet still be changed, we have an opportunity there to examine just exactly what we are and what we are doing in the world. Just watched a movie. I could easily have centered this presentation around the movie. It's called The River Why, based on a book of the same name. I think that book is about 40 or 50 years old. Only recently got made into a movie, a decade or so ago, I think. Um, the River Why, it's an allegory. Um, it's a little by like the Legend of Bagger Vance, pardon me, the Legend of Bagger Vance. It's a little like that movie, although it's done differently. Um, but it's an allegory about life, and the river. Why is why are you here? What is your life all about? And it's beautifully done. I'm not going to really go into detail about it, but it was something I watched in preparation for tonight's presentation because I wanted to have the sense of that broader viewpoint, right? That cosmic viewpoint. Why are we here? each individual. Why are we here? Um, and so that question comes up. There's a sort of philosophical character in the story who asks that question and many others, and sometimes shares a little wisdom. And the story is about a man. And there's also a woman who comes into play, of course, you know. And it's funny because I watched the commentary by the actors, the interviews with the actors that are, the special features on the DVD. And only the person who played the lead made any comment that was in any reference to spiritual development, spiritual path. And of course, in the movie, he's a fly fisherman, that time, throwing a line out to catch mostly trout. I think he also catches some salmon because it's done up in Oregon. And so there's this um, even the fishing itself is an allegory, uh, of living life and finding purpose in life. And so the man goes through these transformations. So this woman comes along, and she is like Mother Divine in a sense, not in a very staid sense. She's young and vital, and she's creative and imaginative, and rather uninhibited. And she confronts him and starts, in essence, to teach him not how to fish, but about why we fish. And so the river, of course, is the allegory of, or analogy of life flowing, and it's has its channel for us. Each river has its own channel. So our river, has a flow, and it's a very charming movie. It's a wonderful thing. So it does stream somewhere. I actually bought the disc, but it does stream online, so you can look it up. The River Why. Um, so anyway, it asks this question, and that's the question really for our work tonight when we get into the group clearing session, is to look at why are we here? What are we living in our life? And are we passing that to others? Family, children, people we work with, people we know, people we have encounters with. What are we passing on? And how can we transform that so it's more life supporting and is leaving something to the future that will be valued by those who have it, even if they don't know that we came to that? And I'd just like to add that in my work, a lot of times I run into these streams of life, these familial patterns that are having a big influence on somebody, and oftentimes a great deal of suffering. And then when we clear up the energy around that pattern, we do it not only for ourselves, the client, and always to some degree for me, I get something out of it too. But we're doing it for other members of the family, those who went before us, who came before us, and who perhaps passed that burden on to us, but did not resolve it in their own lives. And so many times we can, in visiting the energetic history, we can alter that for the people that had been through it before. And many times that's patterns of abuse, patterns of neglect, uh, patterns of exploitation. And so, we can deal with those traumas. As I say, they're generational often traumas, and we can clean that up for the whole family line. We might even find, you know, future generations, people either who are children today and are under that influence, or even who are going to be further down the line and help to clear that up. So oftentimes the work that we're doing has this incredible karmic influence, karmic transformation, so that whoever is having that experience in the family becomes freed of the binding influence of that energy, binding influence of that history. And so they living their own lives in the present whenever that, whatever, you know, even if they're not born or even if they've already passed, we're dealing with it now. It's the only place we can deal with it is in the present. And that has an influence over a broad range of time. And I think that's pretty much all I want to say about passing things to future generations, about living our dash and changing our patterns, changing what we're doing now to have a better influence in the future or on the future, I think to say. We have a change now and then that influences the future. So with that, I'm going to invite questions. You can put them in the chat if you would. Um, that's usually the best way to get them to me. And I will just wait for a moment while that takes place. Give you all an opportunity to say something. If you're in the midst of writing something and need another moment, can you click raise hand for me so I know that I have something coming? Otherwise, I will draw this portion to a conclusion. Just to mention that the webinar in April will be on April 14th. And that will be on living on the narcissism spectrum. Been studying narcissism for a fairly long time. And I became aware recently that psychologists and psychiatrists consider narcissism a spectrum, very much like autism spectrum disorder. I don't like to use the word disorder, but it's okay. At least it isn't a disease because it's not a disease. It's simply a description of certain kinds of behavior. And so some people have a little more of the whichever kind of, characteristic they have. Most of us have a little less. And then there are a few extreme examples. And, we have some prominent public figures, one in particular, who is sort of the ultimate narcissist with strong sociopathic tendencies. So next webinar, I'm going to go through all of that and explain, something about what's going on there. So that'll be a lot of fun. That's going to be April 14th. So let me just check the chat here. Say something about addiction and other habitual patterns. Actually, I think you already described it. Addiction is a habitual pattern. It has a physiological basis, but it's a behavior and a psychology that is a style of thinking that's related to various needs, often related to attachment problems, uh, where one has not had a consistent attachment or a solid attachment to, important parenting figures, male and female, and anything else in between. And so addiction is in one hand, it's very easy to deal with. On the other hand, it is really difficult. The easy part is getting someone or suggesting to someone that they look at what's going on with benign eyes. And that takes some learning. And it's a kind of a step-by-step thing. It unfolds gradually, but eventually they can look at, oh, I'm seeking something rather than the usual view, which is, you're a terrible person because you're addicted and you can't get out of it. And so it's whether it's food or drugs or sex or any specific behavior, you think, well, that's not a good thing, but it's serving you in some way. And when we can view it in a positive way, see how radically different this is than the usual approach to addiction. When we can view it in a positive way, we can begin to find out what it's about, what underlies it. And that can take some time. It's not usually an instantaneous thing, but sometimes people have done a lot of work And when working with me, they say some things and I go like, oh, I see now how your pattern operates, what's going on. And it's not about blaming and complaining. We get past that. We get into that situation where we can have objective viewpoint on what what we do. We do these things, we do these things, we do these other things, and we can begin to go, what is that about? What's inside of that? And we go deeper and deeper and deeper. The going deeper and deeper takes usually quite a bit of time, um, but much faster, I have to say, than um, traditional psychotherapy and 12 steps and all of those things, all of which can be very useful, by the way. Um, but we in the work I do, I like to get out of the idea of psychology and um, just process what is actually there. Question: is being unavailable emotionally or deeper connection a pattern? I think she means not a deeper connection, lacking a deeper connection, a pattern that can run in a family. The only thing I know that doesn't run in families is infertility. Yes, the answer is yes. And it's, I would say it's almost always the case. There are exceptions, of course. Um, People have grown up in a traumatic environment like a war zone, and maybe they don't have parents, or they don't have specific caregivers. And so they get a little something from people, but not very much. Although I have known people who are in dire situations, in groups of children, for instance, who hardly have anyone around them who's older than 18 years of age. I saw a wonderful documentary on refugees in Sudan, that already a couple of decades ago, I believe. And the children just took care of each other. They really took care of each other. It was absolutely remarkable. And so they became a functional family. It wasn't really an adult. They just collectively made decisions about what to do and where to go. And eventually they found their way to some safety. And then they were able, through some non-government organizations, some of the oldest children were able, when they were young adults by that time, they were able to go off and get some education and then go back to the community and actually become the real leaders of the community. And it was a powerful, tremendously powerful thing. I may have said some other date than April 14th. It says 16th. It's a Tuesday. Uh, you said April 16th. I don't know. I have to look at the calendar, but I'm not going to do that now. So if somebody wants to open the calendar and look, it's a Tuesday anyway. It says April 14th is a Sunday. Huh. That's not what I saw on my calendar, but maybe I got the wrong year. All right, we'll deal with that later. I hope that answers that question anyway. Um, uh, Being unavailable emotionally does not have to be a family pattern, but it almost always is. Um, Clarify the name of the movie about the river. It's just called The River Why, WHY. And the why is the question, why are we here? And the river is the flow of life. And our particular channel is our particular river. Each person has their own river. And of course, you may intersect with other rivers as you go along on your flow. Is alcoholism more of a habitual pattern than a disease? I don't know how to measure that. There is definitely a physiological component, but the there is a strong energetic mental pattern, pattern of thinking and seeing the world. Um, and so I don't know how to measure the two aspects of it. Um, But if you deal with the habitualness of it, the mental attitude, and the dependence and the sociopathy that often goes with it, you get away from the physiological aspect of it. But most of these things really, the word disease, like autism or narcissism, are not diseases. They're just styles of functioning of the nervous system. And so you can think of alcoholism that way. It's a particular style of functioning of the nervous system um, that sort of makes one, well, not sort of, that makes one crave intoxication in one form or another. Same thing for sex or food. Um, you know, and so there can be so much energy tied up in that. And that's why the kind of work that I do, where a person does not have to consciously process uh, and think their way through their situation, um, their problems, so to speak. It just allows a much easier approach, much gentler approach that a person doesn't have to run away from, doesn't have to fear in the same way. Somebody's whose hand is up. Uh, okay, so the person whose hand is up, I'm not going to name names. Um, if you can put something in the chat, that, or are you? No, you did. Okay, I think I answered your question then, didn't I? Yeah, I think I did. Okay, this has been fun. Let me just. Is there anything left here? No. Okay, then I will draw this presentation to a conclusion. Thank you for all the questions. And yes, the next webinar is on a Tuesday, second Tuesday in April. We'll have to just look at the calendar, aren't we? Okay.